Hello, my name is Aaron Brown, and this is my introduction speech for Communications 1020. And I always find these introduction speeches kind of interesting because I find it as an opportunity to kind of reflect on those aspects of my character and to really think about those things that define me and make me particularly unique or, and even in those aspects, thinking about those things which I both strive to develop and those things which I'm lacking in, and those things which I perhaps can work on. So in that spirit, I'd like to share a quick story. And it's about a Zen student who approaches his Zen master greatly distressed. And he explains to his master that he's just lost. And the reason for this sentiment is because he feels that he just doesn't know who he truly is. And so in desperation, he pleads with his master to kind of give him some kind of insight into an answer for this question. And the Zen master is completely silent and unresponsive. And after a few moments of pleading, the student, decides that he's not going to get an answer, and he turns away. And as he begins to walk, the Zen master calls him by name. And the student, kind of in a frustrated anticipation, turns and meets his gaze. And the master stares at him and simply kind of smiles and says, there you are. And so I don't know how that story falls on most people. To me, it feels kind of Jim Carrey kind of Pet Detective Part 2 story. But at the same time, I mean, you can cut and paste your whatever sentiments you feel that defines. But for me, it seems to denote an idea that every moment is a moment where you are developing as a human being. And every moment is an opportunity to become ultimately who you truly are. And so with that, I'd like to kind of follow the rubric of this speech in introducing three objects that I feel introduce or kind of reflect those characteristics which I feel are of particular importance to me, and I truly feel define me in seminal ways. So among them, the first one being is it's an art pen. And one of the reasons why this is so important to me is because the pencil or sketching pencil early in my life was a kind of conduit which allowed me to really tap into a very just vivacious imagination as a young guy. And it really, imagination as a whole was a way that I was able to kind of make sense of the things around me, and with my young psyche not being able to always understand why things are the way they are, my imagination allowed a kind of buffer and a way for me to be able to deal with a lot of questions. And in so doing, I found endless possibilities and worlds with interesting characters and creatures that I would draw and I would give life to through this tool. And it was just a wonderful feeling and experience to be able to find that kind of inner adventure as I sought to make sense of the world, and in so doing find worlds that were within myself. And so that was a particularly fun experience for me growing up. And as part of that imaginative mindset that always followed me, that pencil became a pen in a lot of ways. And the pen, the difference between the pen and the pencil, obviously, was my interpretation and my exploration into these worlds in my imagination had changed in some ways, and I sought greater definition for just the visual media that I was producing. So I would draw a picture of a character or a warrior or a dragon, and then questions would arise within me asking, like, well, who is this character? And where is this place? And why is this dragon here and doing this thing? And so that kind of propelled me into the literative exploration of the imagination and the art form of writing. And so that became another dimension of what it was for me in that creative process. And so creativity has always been an aspect of my character, which has allowed me to be able to find a considerable amount of peace and understanding in a world sometimes that is not always that. But the funny thing is as I wrote, this insatiable kind of desire welled within me as I was constantly seeking for avenues to be able to better define and shape and form these stories and these characters and these worlds. And that was really a search for words, a search for phraseology. And that led me to reading. And so my other object here is a book. And the cover doesn't necessarily mean anything, although I do recommend this book. This book is fantastic for anyone who is a would-be author of any type, regardless of genre. But in that spirit, the world of reading really kind of just, expanded my resources and ability to be able to create greater clarity and lucidity to those to that creative process that I was endeavoring in. And so writing and reading really were the means by which I was able to equip myself with a greater power to be able to kind of breathe life into these creations. So as I progressed in reading, the funny thing is I was never really academically inclined while I was young, but as I read more, this new change kind of came within me, and I began to feel a greater compulsion to follow after a kind of scholastic pursuit. And what I mean by that is that as I read and I became acquainted with authors, particularly like classical authors like John Locke, Rousseau, Jeremy Bentham, and a lot of those who were just masters of the written word and the Queen's English, that I came into ideas that really changed and touched me. And that kind of was the impetus that led me to a lot of self questioning and analyzing about the world around me. It inspired in me a desire to kind of get more involved with the things around me, and all of those questions that arised from these inquiries as I read and I came in contact with all these great thinkers and writers just exponentially expanded my fervor for the arts in general. The craft of whether it be writing or drawing in general. And I think these are defining aspects in as much as it's really helped to formulate me as a human being, defining everything from ethics and moral viewpoints, politics, to my interactions with my fellow human beings, the way I view others, and that's been a particular impact for me as a human being, is always striving to develop and become a little bit better than I was the day before. So in that, I really do believe that regardless of whatever objects you feel may define you, it's an important exercise nonetheless to reflect and to take time to think about those things that are truly important to you and think about why they're important to you. And I think therein you can find some very interesting, not only answers, but more expansive questions that then lead you down roads and paths that just expand your horizon as a human being. And with that, I'd like to conclude my speech. And I thank you for listening and for your time. And thank you.